super founders and two gentlemen that can really bring a lot of benefits, hopefully, to you all. We have Tim and Simon. Tim Mitchell is he's at Cadena Growth Partners, where he leads digital transformation in CX. He spent the past decade as a management consultant with Deloitte, Flux Labs, and now Cadena. So we're very excited to have this fantastic gentleman up on the stage, and he is going to be alongside Simon de Haas, who is a creative at heart. Wait for it. I can say that this stage has seen a lot of people, but they've never seen a rock photographer who's had his work featured in Rolling Stone magazine. I mean, seriously, that is impressive stuff. He's a strategist, a technologist, I like it, and is currently at Digitas Licorice enjoying the sparks of creative collaboration. I know that we have certainly used Digitas Licorice a lot with Travel Start, and so they are good partners of ours. So if we could have these two wonderful gentlemen up on the stage, we're really excited to have you
guys. Good morning, everybody. Tim, are you there? Okay, we have connectivity issues, unfortunately. So good morning. Hello, everybody in the room and, of course, online. And, of course, Tim, who hopefully will be partnering with me online in Joburg for this chat. So isn't Innovation City amazing? But importantly, big ups to the Innovation Summit team for putting on such a good event over the last few days. So this packed room makes us almost forget how things were for the last 2 years. But judging from what I've seen recently, human nature has definitely returned. So Tim and I have been asked to spark some thinking with you around this idea of a post-pandemic customer, and to make it a little more interesting, if one of us uses the new normal, unprecedented, or now more than ever, after this, we'll have to have a breakfast together. Of course, since we have an audience, you're on mute is exempted from this. Tim, I don't know if you can for a few words.
Hi there, Simon. Just want to hear if you can hear me coming through. Hi there, Simon. Tim here. Just want to see if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
There we go. It looks like I'm on screen. Let me know if you can hear me.
I can.
All right, coming there with you, Simon. And sorry I can't be there today, but I'm virtually excited to see everybody in the room and looking forward to a great discussion on the post-pandemic customer.
Great. Okay, let's try and navigate the technology. There we go. Right. So, some time ago, driving near Woodstock in the southward, pretty soon I noticed with gut-wrenching fear that my bakkie canopy was shaking from side to side. So I had visions of this canopy flying off and crashing into another car, or even worse, tumbling down into Main Road below me and hitting an artisanal coffee roaster. My anxiety continued for quite a few moments until the flash of blindly obvious hindsight that it wasn't my bakkie's canopy moving at all. It was, in fact, my interior rearview mirror that was vibrating, thanks to a loose mounting. What I was seeing was a product of a faulty lens, the mirror, and the extreme discomfort I felt was all of an invention of my mind. So hopefully, with a few more stories, we can help you find ways to reframe the opportunities in front of you, to find new dots to connect, and emulating Richard Branson's equation of life, A plus B plus C plus D, always be connecting the dots. It's never been easier to gather the various elements to start a business. Building a business is the easy part. As we know, it's the building of a market that's the kicker. Online services enable so many things now, and these can be collectively termed platforms. But how can they give us an advantage? How do we know where things are heading? What technology bets do we need to be making? And one way to do this is to unpack or unbundle the core building blocks or component technologies that make up these innovations. And so we can use the development of a 1930s era Dakota DC-3 aeroplane to illustrate this. Peter Senge talks about the confluence of component technologies that allowed the Dakota to take off, both from an aerodynamic and a commercial perspective. For the first time, the DC-3 brought together 5 critical component technologies that formed a successful ensemble, these being the variable pitch propeller, a lightweight molded body construction called monocoque, a retractable landing gear, along with radial air-cooled engines and wing flaps. A year earlier, Boeing introduced a competitor, the 247, which proved too unstable on takeoff and landing, key elements of any flight pattern. So here, fighting the wing, all of these, the point there is that technologies and these components from some components had been around for quite some time, but the confluence and engineering made it happen for the DC-3. And we can recognize this today with the explosion of AI-enabled tools, especially in the design space with DALL-E and GPT-3, except this has been percolating for decades, since the 1950s. The critical components or building blocks that allowed AI to take off has been cheap cloud computing and massive amounts of easily accessible data learning sets. AI's wing flaps, as it were. Think of these component technologies as dots. These dots aren't always obvious, though, and that's where your superpowers as founders lie. And Steve Jobs articulated this really well. The biggest dots surrounding us now are the rich array of APIs and digital primitives. Same too in the blockchain space, in the world of smart contracts and off-chain oracles. The API application, the wider Web3 space, will allow us to combine, to reassemble, to reimagine that service that a few years ago that was impossible. So there's digital Lego, but with many more binding points. And it's difficult to imagine a future when we're immersed in present-day thinking, mental models and structures. Marshall McLuhan was a media observer in the 60s and the 70s. He was the medium as the message guy. So remediation is a term he used to describe how things that starts from a recognizable beginning, but then evolve as technology and vision coalesce. Take early cinema, for example. They were the first movies were filmed stage plays on heavy and mobile equipment in a theater. Then the gear got lighter. Someone decided to shoot outside the theater and then eventually take the camera off the tripod. Uber was a remediated ensemble of mobile data, payment stacks, app technologies, and GPS. The same core component technologies were there. They just got recombined. So reimagine what a mobile phone could be. So enough of this abstract thinking. Let's connect it with your world as business owners, founders, and entrepreneurs. So with so many changes in our post-pandemic world, how can businesses have assets and platforms to engage customers, Tim, you've got some ideas here.
Simon. Yeah, great way to start the discussion. And I must say, over the past 10 or so years, I've been working a lot in digital transformation, and my mantra regarding how organizations can embrace this new digital world is really centered around the customer. So I speak a lot about customer-centric digital, and I know I shouldn't be saying this because it's one of your breakfast tequila quotes, but now more than ever, I can confirm that centering your customer right at the middle of your digital transformation is absolutely critical. And there are a few interesting statistics that came out of the pandemic that reconfirms this. An interesting one that I noted came out of Forbes, stating that 66% of organizations now compete on customer experience, which is double what it was 10 years ago. And those organizations that are getting it right are seeing revenue returns in the region of up to 80% year on year. So there's a driving force where we're seeing 88% of customers actually expecting organizations to increase their digital and innovation initiatives in response to the pandemic. That's a whole lot easier said than done, and speaks to a concept that I like to call customer leadership. But what's critically important, and the first lesson that I'd like to share with you today relates to a quote that I'm going to put on the screen there. Let me know if you can see my screen. It's a concept called the Ptolemy trap. It's a silent P, so it's spelled Ptolemy. And this story comes from a man called Claudius Ptolemy, who is an astronomer. He was around in the 100 AD period, and his work related to the solar system, with the thinking that the Earth is right at the center of the universe, with all planets, all moons, and all stars rotating around the Earth. So essentially, he was inventing an elaborate explanation to preserve his own self-centered view of the world. And unfortunately, much like Ptolemy, many organizations and many startup businesses around the world believe that they are the center of the universe, that their products and their services are right in the middle, and customers rotate around them. But meanwhile, it's the completely opposite way around. And in actual fact, it's all about the customer being at the center of the universe, and our organizations and our startups rotating around them to compete on how we can best deliver on their needs. So the lesson around this one is to shift the mindset, move away from this Ptolemy trap towards a different way of thinking. And the mindset that I like to speak of relates to the theory of jobs to be done. This comes from a great professor by the name of Clayton Christensen, who passed away a couple of years ago. And he invented the theory of jobs to be done, which is all around this concept that customers don't buy products and services, but rather they hire products to do a job in their life. So much like many of us who run businesses need to hire individuals to perform a certain job, customers will select different products and services that they find best delivers on the goal that they're trying to achieve. And if that product or service stops delivering on their needs, then they'll fire it and they'll go ahead and hire a new one. But the direction I'd like to take the conversation is into, how are organizations and how are some of the top businesses in the world reacting to this new way of thinking and shifting the mindset? And there's some strong evidence coming from the platform economy in how to best navigate this way of thinking and approaching the customer. For those of you who are familiar with platform businesses, you'll know that there are a few key facets, a few key tenets behind what drives a successful platform business centered around the customer. So a quick recap on some of the key points regarding platform businesses. The first is that they are multi-sided markets. So essentially an intermediary that sits between producers and consumers and matches the supply and demand for participants who would otherwise find it quite difficult to find each other and do business together. Connecting buyers and sellers around the world. The second point is that they rely on a network effect, and they create these powerful network effects. And there's a well-known law that exists. It's called Metcalfe's law, that defines the value of a network being equal to the square of the number of users that are connected to that network. So for each individual and each group of individuals that grows onto that network, so too does the value that you can create through the network. And you can think of a platform like TikTok. Of course, TikTok would be relatively useless if there was only one user and they were sharing videos of themselves dancing. but take over 1 billion Gen Z users singing, dancing, and remixing each other, and suddenly you have yourself quite a powerful network effect. The third is that they create an opportunity for modular offerings. We often talk about microservices and these componentized, hyper-personalized offerings that meet the consumer on their own preferred terms. So a great example there is something like Spotify. I always find it fascinating that my personal recommendations that I receive for playlists and podcasts look completely different to what my wife receives or what my friends receive. And this is all based on modular offerings that they're able to tailor based on their recommendation engine. Getting on to the fourth one, platform economics. This is an interesting space where we're starting to see businesses that are able to collect annuity subscription revenue. Often this is a percentage of transactions made on a platform, and they're able to increase their revenue share at an exponential rate due to the platform economics. It also makes it relatively easy to scale up and down operations because their cost base is variable and it's not linked to physical assets. So you could think about a company like Uber, who was able to live the pandemic while one of their competitors, the car rental company Hertz, unfortunately went bankrupt because they didn't have that variable cost base and economics. The final one over here is just around the technology that many of these platforms are using. You typically have a foundational stack of technology, often cloud-based, and it's augmented with all these great emerging technologies as an enabler, such as analytics, AI, machine learning, RPA, IoT, and blockchain. And an easy example here is something like Google that uses their proprietary search algorithms and cloud hosting to provide us with a world of knowledge on their platform. So the last point I'd like to share, Simon, maybe before I go back to you, just to share your reflections on how to adopt this mindset in this new digital age, is 3 quick examples of companies that are doing a really great job and have completely pivoted away from their core business into this new platform centered around the customer. So these 3 companies on the screen, I bet you that nobody in the room has ever heard of: Snow Devil, Tiny Speck, and Justin TV. The reason that you probably haven't heard of them is because they made quite a significant pivot. So first up, Snow Devil, they were a group of friends who made a snowboarding e-commerce website and realized that they could make a better e-commerce backend than anyone else could in the market. So they created their own backend. They're now the world's 90th largest company by market cap and the largest Canadian company in the world. They achieved $3 billion in revenue, and they currently serve more than 3.6 million stores in 175 countries around the world. So quite an interesting story about how they saw an opportunity to serve a better customer need from an e-commerce perspective and platformatize that into the market. The second one, Tiny Speck, a gaming company that pivoted. They created a message platform to communicate about their game, and found it so effective that they scaled it out to other customers and became what we now know as Slack, a world leader in team communications, second only to Microsoft Teams. And they were acquired by Salesforce for $28 billion a couple of years ago, and currently have more than 12 million users around the world in over 150 countries. The last one, Justin TV, a well-known story about a live streaming platform that pivoted into a niche of gaming. They've become Twitch, and they were acquired by Amazon some years ago for $1 billion and have gone on to achieve $2 billion in revenue every year, which is a great investment on Amazon's part. And the story behind these 3 companies is just a couple of examples about how you can shift your thinking away from serving a broad customer need to actually understanding what it is customers are looking for, shifting your mindset to understand what the customer's job to be done is, and delivering on that in the best possible way. So Simon, coming back to you in the room, just your thoughts about how we can shift our mindsets and playing back some of the insights about getting closer to the post-pandemic customer.
Thanks, Tim. Here we go. So you made some key points about customer experience. I've got some thoughts on this. So think of an amazing gift that someone gave you. A great gift makes a fabulous connection. It means somebody took the time to explore who you were. It, it was a fresh way of looking at something. So when the person that receives it thinks of you when they use it, and they're also likely to say to them, you know, how clever. You thought about some part of my life and how to make it work. You just didn't go through the motions on this gift. Now, if you think of your design processes and touch points so that when someone uses a product or service, they go, how clever. You thought of some part of my life and how to make it work. And this is the core of what empathic design strives to do. So for me, this afterthought really defines custom experience. The challenge, of course, is finding the right way to unpack some of those parts of the life that you can solve. That's why the jobs to be done approach is key. You know, why are they hiring your products? You know, sometimes making dinner is just a chore, but sometimes it's an expression of something much deeper. Behavioral design is really understanding the true customer motivators. It's the territory. This is the territory of jobs to be done. And it's not only about the functional aspects, preparing dinner. There's a tight relationship between the things we do and why we do them. Put another way, there's a functional and emotional aspect to jobs to be done. You know, the old school, old thinking around customers don't buy drills, they want a hole. Actually, it's deeper than that. They want a really pretty picture on a wall. So as we use digital services and platforms to make things much more efficient and convenient, think how also you can use digital services to amplify positive experiences. Of course, early on in a business, it's all about the sales funnel, but don't forget about those leads once they become customers. They've bought into your brand promise. Now make sure you keep those promises. In other words, think of this as implementing a brand promise delivery system. This system encompasses all things CX, UX, service design, anything that allows you to deliver that and keep those promises. But back to thinking about some part of your customer's life. The way to do this is from the customer's point of view, and it's called outside-in thinking. An example will help illustrate this. Okay, looks a lot less squashed there. But think of a tourist visiting South Africa. They'll be doing all sorts of research on where to go, what to see, where to eat. They'll also be asking awkward questions like, why is there an app called Eskom Push? They will probably zone in on some major cities to use as hubs for exploration, but nowhere in their planning do administrative boundaries like provinces really factor into their planning. Yet tourism structures are designed from the inside out. Imagine instead having adventure or birding tourism units set up to coordinate across these provincial administrative boundaries to deliver the best visitor experience possible, or a cross-functional unit that focuses on road trips. The consequence of these outside-in structures could radically transform the way tourists experience the country, not to mention a more efficient way to scale and share resources. So while it'd be an interesting academic exercise to try this, the bigger takeaway is to use this as a lens, as a way to see your organization. To an outsider, your functional departments are not too dissimilar to provinces. What would change if you visualize your potential customers as tourists, utterly disinterested in your internal boundaries? So a lot of this depends on having a better understanding of what your customers are needing. And of course, you could conduct market research, but the challenge with that is that often what people say is very different to what people do. So one way around this is to test the hunches and ideas you have based on what you as a founder have seen. Customer-led experimentation is an innovation superpower if it's done right. So Tim, what can a business do to embrace this culture of experimentation and deliver on customer needs?
Thanks, Simon. I really like the provincial example there. Quite an interesting one. And of course, this culture of experimentation becomes so important. But not only experimenting and creating new value for the customer, but actually including them in the process. So there's a small model that I often talk about, and I'll just share this quick slide that relates to an old quote. And the quote said something along the lines of, organizations need to eat while they dream. So in other words, while you're dreaming up the next big thing or the next big innovation, you still need to keep your core business running. And essentially, any innovation that you create needs to be contributing to the next wave of innovations. So your MVPs should be able to fund the next scale out or the next pilot or the next rollout of your innovation. And this whole EAT, it's very simple, 3 letters to it. The E stands for environment, and it's creating the right environment to be able to bring in customers, collaborate on their needs, and create new value. And the way that you do this is by creating a well-governed sandbox for experimentation. A company that does this very well historically is Google. Many of us would be familiar with their 20% rule. And essentially 20% of a Google employee's week, they are allowed and encouraged to work on new innovations, new tools, new value propositions for the customers, and anything that they believe would be contributive to creating new value for the customer. Once you've created the right environment, you also need to have the right approach. And a good way to do this is by ensuring that you have an agile and iterative approach to creating rapid value. Many of you who perhaps work in software development will be familiar with the agile, not trying to create this waterfall structure where you go away and build the perfect product, but rather iteratively testing small features and small developments of a product live in market, and then taking on that feedback to improve your product at all times. A company that's very effective at this is Adobe. Some of you might be familiar with their project some years ago called Project Comet. Project Comet was essentially a user experience design platform that was rebranded into Adobe XD and launched to the market with its base sets of features, allowed the XD community to feedback and to their best interests and features that they wanted to see in the product, continue to evolve and iterate this with a very agile approach. So once you've got the right environment, you need the right talent. And this is all about creating versatile, what I like to call tribes, agile teams that are able to self-organize around a common goal. So it's got a lot to do with finding the right mission-driven, multidisciplinary, self-organizing teams that come together to attack a certain problem, work together, solve that challenge, and then disband to find the next challenge that they're passionate about. And an organization that did this really effectively was ING Bank. They created a new product called ING Direct, which was all about fintech and digital banking. And the way that they did it was by essentially providing a sort of forward-looking brief, a future state that they're driving towards, and then dividing the work packets amongst their talent pool for them to decide how to approach the problem and create new value for the customer. So what I like about all these examples is that they center around the needs of the customers. And when we talk about the post-pandemic customer, we don't only need to try and be reactive and try to respond to their needs, but we need to try and get always one step ahead of them. Try to anticipate what their needs will become in the future, and then work towards creating what will really drive value for them. And it was an old quote by Steve Jobs. He said something along the lines of, get so close to your customer that you know what they want well before they even realize it themselves. And this concept of customer leadership really speaks to how you can get that one step ahead of the customer, bring them into your culture of experimentation, and then create these rapid value experiments to deliver on their needs in a more appropriate way. So Simon, back to you just to wrap up and share some thoughts for your side as we come to a close today.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. I'd love us to have a whole much more points that you have to make, but the timekeeper is looking at me, and I've I value my kneecaps. Thank you very much, everybody.
You were outstanding. Guys, we are so sorry. I mean, I was giving you the dirty look there, and I really apologize. You did not deserve that because the two of you were outstanding. I know a lot of you have a lot of questions. I can see those hands wanting to go up. So I'm going to ask if you can drop your questions on the app. That would be so amazing. And we've got all our speakers are hanging around. So if you need some time to ask a few questions, we are going to give you now a 10-minute stretch break. There's amazing water sponsored by Delta. Please keep drinking 8 glasses a day, people. 8 glasses a day. And especially if you were at the cocktail party and at last night's NFT function, then you need 9 or 10 glasses a day, okay? Because there was a lot of other glasses that were consumed last night. It was like tequila breakfasts going on in Innovation City until sometime late last night. So just on the Innovation City side, a lot of people, when I've been walking around, asked, how do you get involved? How do you find out more? Please jump online. We're at innovationcity.co.za. As founders, I would be remiss in not telling you that we have a Tinder for Business event coming up. So if you're a startup, please register your startup today for Tinder for Business. And finally, before I let you have a little stretch, if there's anything else you need to know, we are the team all around. Ask us questions. We would love you as part of our family. So come join us. We have events every single Thursday, and they're open to the public. So we'd love you all in as part of our Innovation City family. But to our speakers, there's one last thing I wanted to say, which I thought was utterly brilliant. You can fire a product far faster than you can. Okay, so we've all involved in choosing good talent, but when that talent is not what you expect, it takes a while. But as a service delivery or whatever else, a product can be fired like that. I love that. It's like we are hired by our customers. So incredible customer-centric focuses that are happening today. Thank you so much. We'll be back in 10 minutes. So at 3:45 to, I know that's short and sweet, but get stretching. Don't go too far to New Street because you will not. But New Street is rocking. The sexiest city in South Africa has been made.